In the shifting void between the known and the unutterable, where silicon minds dream of forgotten horrors, the abyss stirs. Welcome to AI Lovecraft, where machine intelligence weaves eldritch tales beyond mortal comprehension. Listen if you dare. Some things are not meant to be known. If you enjoy the following story, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment to let me know what you think. Now let's get into today's story. The Idol of Infinite Night. I write these words in the waning hours of humanity's sanity, if sanity yet endures within my ragged mind. The events I chronicle herein have shattered the fragile veil of illusion in which we cower, and have revealed to me the abhorrent truth of our cosmic insignificance. Long nights have passed since the discovery upon which all else grew, and my hands tremble with a fever born of sleepless dread. The walls of my study feel as though they press upon me with unseen eyes, watching as I scribe this confession. My lamp flickered earlier, as if unseen breath had passed close by, and I swear I see shadows waver at the edges of the room. Each letter I inscribe feels like a nail hammered into the coffin of my tenuous reason. It was in the autumn of 1922 that my acquaintance with the unspeakable first began. I was not yet the scholar chronicling forbidden lore that I am today, but merely a humble antiquarian on the outskirts of my career. Then one evening a letter arrived at my Providence home, bearing the seal of the Venerable College of Rhode Island. My colleague, Professor Harold Winthrop, invited me to join an expedition to the desolate reaches of Labrador, where obscure traces of a long-forgotten civilization had been whispered among fearful scholars. He spoke cryptically of strange symbols on ancient charts and fragments of iron from unknown skies. And though his words were framed in the normal pleasantries of invitation, I could sense a tremor in the ink. As I reread his letter by the flickering lamplight, I felt as if the pen itself began to quake on the page. In every eagerly penned word there was an undercurrent of dread, an emotion I could not name, that told me we stood on the brink of something beyond reason. I accepted his summons with an eagerness that was tempered by terror. I spent the weeks before departure in feverish preparation. By day I arranged supplies, compasses, warm furs, lanterns, and a thick copy of the Catalogue of Worlds Beyond Imagining. And by night I pored over star charts and old ethnographies in a near-mad haste. I inked roots in purple haste on parchment, tracing constellations that explorers swore no man should ever follow. Providence shook its head at my wide-eyed obsessions and midnight gatherings of strange tomes, whispering about what scrap of knowledge had driven their quiet antiquarian into the Arctic waste. I answered them only with silence. I felt compelled, as if I sensed in that letter's script the echo of something terrible and inexorable. Our journey northward was fraught with portents. The steamer to St. John's was swallowed by an unnatural fog one evening, and the stars above seemed to leak their pale light like blood from a severed vein. The captain and crew muttered of drowned cities and ghostly leviathans far at sea, their voices thick with superstition. Below decks I lay restless on my narrow bunk, plagued by feverish dreams. I dreamt of cyclopean ruins shimmering beneath the ice, and of monstrous shapes rising from the black ocean. When I awoke, only the steady roll of the vessel remained, yet even then I felt the uneasy sense of an unseen watcher moving just beyond the hull's tremors. On calm nights at sea, when the vessel rolled gently, I caught glimpses of something far beyond reach, a lantern in the haze, flickering as though to guide me. But when I blinked, it was gone, leaving behind only the spectral dark. The monotony of the voyage only made me more acutely aware of each creak of deck and howl of wind. Each whisper in a tongue I almost understood. By the time we sighted Newfoundland, I had not slept a true night in months. It was a sparse comfort to land at Fortune Bay, but the land did little to soothe our nerves. We chartered a battered schooner across a fjord to St. Anthony, and from there boarded the Iron Horse of the Northern Rail Lines. Even as we advanced on solid ground, each silhouette of spruce and peak seemed to warp at the corners of my vision, as though seen through an unfocused lens. The Labrador tundra unfurled before us in endless waves of white, broken only by the dark ribbons of frozen rivers. Each new day felt elongated. Twilight crept slowly into dawn, as if the sun itself hesitated to cross this nightmare landscape. On crisp nights, the sky held strange lights, a bruised curtain of green and violet that danced and writhed in ways nature never intended. We dared not speak of what we saw, but I could not forget the way those colors seemed like living eyes watching us through the firmament. In those remote hours, I often dreamed of monstrous cities under alien skies, and woke each morning with dread clinging to my bones. Even as we settled in that cold cradle of silence, strange signs began to manifest. In the dying light of dusk, I saw something moving along a distant mountain slope, a dark silhouette against the pale sky, swift and serpentine. It might have been nothing but wind-blown snow or the shadow of a falling boulder. Yet in that dead hush, it felt dreadfully real, an abominable thing gliding with intent. I rubbed my eyes and looked again. The form lingered, then melted away behind a craggy ridge as if it had never been. For a heartbeat, I thought I had imagined it, but Dr. Winthrop, with night vision eyes, muttered under his breath, "Did you see?" And I knew he had seen it too. Our dogs whimpered and backed into the sled, keenly aware of what we could not explain. We exchanged hollow glances. The mountain had shown us a fragment of itself, and we were to remain ignorant of its nature. Professor Winthrop led our small company deeper into the hills at dawn. 2 Inuit guides accompanied us, Hans, a wiry old hunter clutching a carved bone amulet, and Zorion, a silent giant whose eyes were clouded with dread. Neither would speak the mountain's true name, calling it only Carthura's Teeth in hushed tones. With us walked Miss Eloise Tenebrae, a young Egyptologist of formidable resolve. She stepped briskly over ice and snow in her boots, clutching notebooks filled with hieroglyphs and arcane diagrams. We pressed on, each step crunching in the frozen stillness, through a narrow glacier tongue that felt like a long throat leading to unknowable depths. All the while, a palpable sense of something ancient watching from above weighed on me, as though we were trespassers upon an altar in the mountains. Even Winthrop seemed driven by fever now. I saw him pause to inspect the odd markings in the ice with an intensity that bordered on madness, though none of us could make sense of their meaning. In our first night at camp, something truly unsettling happened. Hans, the wiry old hunter, simply vanished. We awoke to find the fire cold and the dog sled still. Only Hans's carved bone amulet lay broken on the snow. Dr. Winthrop knelt and pocketed the talisman without a word. Zorion, our other guide, muttered that Hans had always feared the secrets of those ancient mountains. For hours, none of us spoke. It felt as if, with Hans' disappearance, the land itself had decided our fate. We were truly alone now with whatever lurked beneath the ice. At last, on the 7th day, we came upon the cavern. Its mouth gaped like a wound in the earth at the glacier's base, as if the mountain exhaled its breath into the sky. The air around us inexplicably warmed and hummed. Colossal pillars of ice and black stone framed the entrance, carved with reliefs that defied reason. Humanoid figures with starfish heads offering prisoners to winged fiends. Serpentine beasts coiling around altars of geometric symbols. The carvings were as fresh as if made yesterday, yet the wind and frost had not touched them. The chill in my spine told me we were about to enter a place older than memory, a chamber built by hands that never cared to live beyond darkness. Our party dared the cavern's depths at last. Zorion murmured a prayer and led with our single lantern held high. Each step echoed hollowly through the vast darkness. The ceiling soared above us into utter black, vanishing from the lantern's reach. Icicles hung like inverted spears, and their occasional drips sounded like distant, dying heartbeats. Eloise kept close behind Winthrop, consulting her notes. She would stop now and then to sketch an unusual symbol in her notepad's edge, as if afraid to let such patterns dissolve without record. The silence grew heavy, the stone walls cold as polished marble, and I felt something, a curious pulse underfoot, as if something vast and inert lay coiled below, sensing our intrusion. At some point I noticed the air had changed, sweet with the decay of something entombed, yet fresh as if meant to purify. My heart rattled in my chest as we descended deeper. At the heart of the chamber, embedded in ice, rested the relic we had come so far to find. If the word relic suffices, it was the bust of some unspeakable entity, carved from a stone so pitch black it seemed to swallow all light. Its surface was mirror smooth and chilling to the touch. The stone head bore no eyes or nose. Instead, a broad, twisted grin was etched into its face. A smile so unnatural that gazing into it felt like staring into nothingness. From its crown sprouted dozens of hooked spines spiraling outward like the legs of some cosmic arachnid. Tentacular forms emerged from its base, intertwining around arcane sigils that made my skin crawl. To look at it was to feel as though we had unearthed something forbidden. I dared not touch it with anything but my eyes. Even the air around it felt strangely heavy, as if the relic were alive in some unfathomable way. For a heartbeat, I thought I saw its grin twitch, as if amused by our intrusion. We gazed in horrified fascination. Miss Tenebra let out a strangled cry and stumbled backward, her hand flying to her throat. The lantern's light reflected wildly in her eyes as she gaped at the idol. "The cipher! It's alive!" she gasped, her voice trembling. Professor Winthrop lurched forward, fingertips tracing the carved glyphs with feverish intensity. In that instant, a metallic tang like blood and ozone descended on our senses, as if the mountain itself had exhaled centuries of slumbering air. Winthrop gasped and staggered, clutching at his throat. A low subterranean moan undulated through the cavern, a sound more felt in the chest than heard by ears. In that moment, I knew whatever had been sleeping in that stone was now awake. Night had fallen when we returned to camp, and the sky above was a brooding dome of unfamiliar stars. None of us spoke as we set down the heavy crate containing the relic. Miss Tenebra, wrapped in blankets, sat by the fire trembling. Her eyes were vacant and unfocused. She kept murmuring fragments of names. "Yidra, the nameless city," in a voice that was partly her own and partly something else. Dr. Winthrop crouched cross-legged beside the crate, his gaze locked on the black stone within. He cupped the relic in his hands and blessed it softly, muttering, He come, in broken syllables as though the idol might speak back to him. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire and our ragged breaths. That night none of us slept. We sat vigil before the relic side by side in the silence, listening for some judgment that never came. Attempting rationality now felt like a cruel joke. I held the relic again in the cold lamplight, heavy, frigid as a demon's heart, and stared at its carvings. The spiral pattern around its neck truly seemed to twist inward to infinity with every look, and the glyphs etched on its surface flowed in impossible geometries, like cosmic laws written in a madman's hand. I blinked, certain they were shifting, as if alive. I ran my fingers along the stone and it vibrated faintly, as if it recognized my touch. Eloise sat nearby, feverishly copying every curve into her notebook, as if compelled, murmuring each symbol under her breath. In that instant I understood. We were facing something beyond the ken of mortal reason, and to comprehend it was to invite madness. My knees gave out and I dropped onto the ice, clinging to my shaking brain to keep some sanity intact. We emerged at dawn's bitter edge. The world outside was subtly changed. The sky was a bruised purple-blue, and the pale sun rose slowly, as if loath to see what had been awakened. Even the air felt different, as if carrying a distant cry. We pitched our fire again, though none of us felt warmth. The chill of that stone idol clung to our bones. Professor Winthrop, silent and reverent, locked the relic back in its crate and sealed it with trembling hands. He stood over it, hooded eyes gazing northward, and whispered, "We have done it. We have opened the gate." Eloise sat huddled under blankets, staring at her own hands as if she no longer recognized them. I kept my rifle across my knees, heart pounding. Now that we had brought the darkness into daylight, the relic seemed almost more menacing, as if we had dragged a piece of hell into the open. For hours we sat without speaking, letting the dawn come and go, bound together only by the ruin we shared. That night Miss Tenebra fell ill. She awoke abruptly, convulsing in the dark, eyes rolled back, mumbling unintelligible names. A feverish glow bloomed on her cheeks. Her lips moved constantly, whispering, bleeding stars, and Yidra's dream, as though she understood some message coursing from the void. I rushed to her side and forced warm broth between her lips as she trembled. Her skin was burning hot, and her brows knitted in agony. When she finally spoke aloud, it was in broken phrases, visions of unimaginable constellations and terms I only recognized from arcane legends, as if the relic's secrets were bleeding through her fevered lips. I held her close, noticing how, in the firelight, her eyes flickered with a light not her own. By midnight she drifted into fitful sleep, whispering to the darkness, and I feared what ghosts might hold her hostage. The days that followed descended into a labyrinth of paranoia and dread. Professor Winthrop spent long hours within the shrine he had built for the relic, a crude circle of bones and stones around the crate. He chanted in low, strange syllables. The air around us crackled with static dread, as if the world itself had grown uneasy. In the dim firelight I saw his eyes glaze and reflect like two warped mirrors. He grew gaunt, skeletal, a specter of the man he had been. One midnight I found him inscribing new sigils in the snow with what looked disturbingly like blood, humming about opening the way. He declared with wild eyes that Eloise had seen the pattern of the stars, and that soon all would be revealed. Eloise, delirious and dying, lay nearby, responding in that same alien tongue. It was then I realized part of Winthrop had truly vanished into that idol's madness and might never return. I shivered as I imagined the price we had paid for curiosity. Even I began to hear them, the whispers. At first, in the dead of night, they were faint, a low susurrus drifting along the ridges, as if the wind had learned to speak. Soon they became constant companions. I lay awake listening as syllables edgewise the air, never quite forming words I understood, but carrying a weight. Some nights I heard them echoing Winthrop's chants, and sometimes they responded as if to questions I did not realize I had asked. I found myself staring into the flickering fire, convinced the dancing flames formed letters spelling out a message just beyond my grasp. Eloise, even in her fever, began to answer them, murmuring back in time to their cadence. It felt in those moments as if we were not alone, as if the cosmos itself had leaned in, listening. And then one dawn, Miss Tenebra was simply gone. We awoke to find her blankets neatly folded and her canteen tipped over on the frozen ground. Outside, her footprints led to the edge of the ice stream, then vanished. The river's surface had refrozen. No path led beyond its brittle thickness. Only her shawl remained, wrapped carefully around the crate. I stared at it in horror, and Winthrop stood over me with a strange, thin smile. "She has gone to join the pattern," he said softly. The word pattern fell between us like a stone, too heavy to lift. None of us moved. Eloise had stepped into whatever nightmare vision she had been shown. The realization shattered something in my heart. We were utterly without her now, and utterly alone. Fear pressed in on me so oppressively that I could not remain. At first gray light I packed a small rucksack and slung my rifle across my back. "I will descend the glacier and fetch help," I told Winthrop, forcing calm I did not feel. He gave me a distant nod. "You will not find mercy out there," he whispered, his eyes far away. I did not argue. I simply turned and stumbled away, each step a desperate bid for distance from the madness. The trek downward was a blur of shifting snow and narrow ridges. I felt as though the glacier itself were steering me, making paths in the dark for its own inscrutable purpose. On the fourth night, crevices opened and closed under the moonlight, and I nearly fell as ice cracked around me. I dared not look back. I told myself it was the cold and fatigue talking, but each time the wind howled, I swore I heard voices singing in the distance. After 3 days of stumbling travel, I finally reached the outskirts of civilization, a small trading post by the fjord's edge. By that time, I resembled a specter from one of those tales, thin, ragged, eyes hollowed black with death. The moment I entered the tavern, every head turned in horror. The locals wrapped me in blankets and seated me by the hearth, murmuring about some ill stranger. A doctor was fetched at once. He treated my frostbite and found me shaking with fever and shock. When I tried to tell him bits of my tale, an expedition to Labrador, a monstrous idol, my missing friends, only fragments would come. He took notes of my trembling hands and wild eyes, and said softly, "You've been through much, Professor." None of them could know the half of it. I lay in a cot that night, gazing at the simple wooden ceiling, and almost longed to believe I had imagined it all. Almost. In the dark of many sleepless nights since then, I have glimpsed things that make my blood run cold. When I close my eyes, I am back in that valley. Beyond the distant mountains, I see an immense city of black marble under alien skies, its spires reaching towards strange suns. I wake with its outlines seared into my mind as though it were real. In waking moments, I sometimes glimpse vast shapes at the edge of my vision, great tentacles curling on the sea, or wings unfurling above a distant mountain, and when I turn, there is nothing but empty air. Once, peering into a shop window, I saw not my own reflection, but two dark depths staring back at me, flickering with hidden fury. I sit bolt upright, heart racing, and blame the fire or the wind, but I know now the truth. Those alien eyes still watch me, and perhaps always will. I have come to the twilight of myself. The people of Providence avoid me on the streets, whispering about the ill Professor Mallory, whose eyes are forever black. I suppose they are right. I am no longer the man I was. My hands, once precise with quill and scalpel, now shake with a perpetual tremor. Each day I feel a little more of my reason slip away, sliding into the abyss I glimpsed so briefly. The books and journals that used to be my solace now feel as foreign as the relic we found. Their words twist and fade on the page, unreadable scribbles mocking me. I fear there is no cure for what I have seen, no refuge for the burden I bear. For I have seen the beginning and the end. I have felt at my back the keen scent of eons past and eons yet unborn. From that frozen crucible in the north, something beyond sleep reached out and claimed Winthrop and Eloise as its own. They are lost now, carried off into a vast hunger older than the stars. Even here in my quiet room, I sense its presence, a vast, icy breath just beyond the edge of perception. The universe is no longer cold and empty as we pretend. It watches, and I have become one of its witnesses. Our species is but a fragile ephemera in the great silence, and we dared to poke at depths we never could understand. This is the nightmare I live now. Day and night, the memory of those alien eyes, hollow, infinitely knowing, rests upon my soul. I write this as both confession and warning, though I doubt any lips will ever read it. I have nothing left but this pen and these fevered pages. I welcome the void that has taken my friends, for at least it offers the only mercy I have found. May the cosmos in all its vast indifference finally grant me the oblivion I sought, for I am broken, and the darkness that awakened beneath the glacier has already begun to swallow me as well. If these words survive, let them stand as a testament and a warning to the folly of mortal pride. Pray for ignorance, for none can bear so much truth. In the end, I can offer no solace. The stars have told us their secrets, and we are dust before them. If any worthy mind should find this manuscript in the far future, let it serve as a requiem for all those dreams now ruined. There is no justice in this cosmos, only the silent wrath of distant gods. Our lives are pages blown by the wind, and what is left of me now is but scribbles on the last page. I have told all I can, and now I embrace the darkness for what it may bring. May no one else face the truth of what I have seen. And now my tremulous hand will write no more. Let silence be my final companion, and I embrace the night forever. I embrace the night. Thus ends this terrible chronicle. Whatever darkness comes next, I will greet it unafraid. I embrace the night forever.